Let's get on and talk about the wonders and joys of what's been happening in the advertising and UA world. So let's kick off. Damia, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? Yeah, if you just pick up the mic.
Hi and welcome. And I'm Damla. I'm the CEO of AppNava. Normally I'm doing the managerial things for AppNava, but I'm the data scientist and I complete my bachelor and PhD degree in statistics. And this is the reason that I'm attending this session to inform you about a little bit information about the data and the predictive modeling and what you can do for your user acquisition strategy. Yeah, this is the reason.
Perfect.
Nice to meet you.
Brett, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Thanks, Oscar. Hi, everybody. My name is Brett Orlanski, and I work at a company called Bango. We are a producer of custom audiences that run on Facebook. Bango is a payments processor at our core. We take that payments data, we produce it into custom audiences based of payers rather than just new users, and we offer them to other mobile app advertisers to focus their user acquisition, again, focused on payers. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, stuff. And Adam, last but no means least.
Hi, everyone. I'm Adam. I'm from AppsFlyer. I'm the Director of Product for Gaming, looking at the entire gaming offering that AppsFlyer produce.
Great stuff. Okay, so if you're kind of wondering what the context is there anyone in the room who hasn't heard of the whole IDFA thing that happened a couple of years ago? I'm assuming we all have had some exposure to the industry, therefore we will know that wonderful step towards privacy, safety, and nothing to do with Apple being able to control data for advertising at all. No, I didn't say that. I wouldn't like to get myself into any trouble. Obviously, in I think it was was it 2021? I can't remember what month it was when it actually fully came into force. After a long, protracted period of
fear
and loathing and scariness, and a lot of changes. Obviously, changes came in, which meant that we had to have players opt in, which is fine. Hasn't been the most useful in terms of data because I believe I'm right in saying that something like 20% at the original stage of people actually signed up. I think it's slightly higher now, around 30% of gamers. But we are talking about a very big loss of the amount of available data and available visibility. It's had a profound effect, I think, on almost every platform in terms of our ability to find and target users. The level of nuance is
I think
not
those
there.
Numbers, though, the sort of 20-30%, really depends on how you're measuring.
Yes.
And what you're looking at when you're talking about opt-in. Because a lot of apps aren't asking anyway. Yeah. So are they included within that number? And actually, from AppsFlyer's perspective and the customers that we have, we're seeing it for gaming. We're seeing it more around 40%.
Oh, okay. That's great, yeah.
So a lot of apps won't ask permission to track.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. It's like, in fact, I mean, let's kick it. Seeing as you've started, Adam, I'm going to jump you into it. So you're painting a slightly better picture than the majority of people are saying, which I don't disagree with, by the way. Particularly, I think if you invite people in a positive way and you explain why you're asking their permission, you set context for that permission, you do see slightly higher. But even with that, it has had a chunk of data that's no longer available to us, rightly or wrongly. I mean, I think personally that's probably not completely bad from a user experience point of view, but it's not great from our ability to track nuance, in particular things like A/B testing and stuff like that. But I'd like to know what you think from your perspective. Is this now changing profoundly the way we work, or is it just a bit of extra effort to find people?
I guess I come at this from two different perspectives. So before I was at AppsFlyer, I was at Product Madness for about 7 years, and the entire gaming industry, certainly mobile gaming industry, was brought about with user-level data. Everything has come from being able to judge what a user does, all of the in-app events, everything else within the game. So, yes, to answer your question, it has had a negative impact for gaming. However, I think the way that people look at this moving forward, there is nothing that can be done about this. This is a change that Apple's made for good or bad. Personally, I feel it's for the good of the end user. But we now have to work with that and adjust to the the new normal. I hate that term, but it seems to have been coined and stuck.
It definitely has, and I think there's that new normal is interesting. For me, I think what's fascinating about it is it's given new breath for some traditional mindsets being reinvented. So the building up of your brand as a game, as a technique, is now has some element of importance, because performance marketing efficiency at a user level isn't there so much. But Brett, I'm talking now, and I should be getting you to tell the lovely audience, for your point of view, how has this affected things?
I think Adam made a good point earlier. He said that it depends who you ask, who's the winner and who's the loser. If Apple was here, they would say that this is great. This is for everyone's interest. This is, I don't know if they're selling more iPhones, but they're building a whole ad network out for this. If you ask the end user, do you feel better about it personally, Oscar? I'll be super honest. I don't really care. I don't really think it's made any difference in my life. I don't feel like ads are better or worse, or my privacy is better protected or not. So it's kind of like a strange question to think about. But if you're really honest with yourself, does it really matter? I'm not so sure it does. But for everybody else in this room, it's probably much worse. The industry has taken significant hits. We've all had to kind of juggle our business models and our propositions and the way we do business to compensate for this. And I don't know if it's a new normal, it is what it is, but it's not easier. And I think it's just made a hard job much harder. There's mitigation solutions and things you can do about it, but it's definitely more challenging of an environment from the app developer and from the advertiser's point of view. Definitely harder.
Yeah, and I think in particular when you look at, it's not just for me being able to target an Apple user. It's also had a profound effect on being able to target any user.
That's right. Right. If we're going to accept that ads exist, and we all do, then they should be good ads. They should be relevant to you. And relevant ads require some targeting, some user level data. And to your earlier point as well, this is the lifeblood of all of our marketing is user level data. So use it appropriately and use it wisely to make the experience as best as possible.
So, Damia, I mean, you kind of hinted at a couple of things in this area anyway, in terms of how you can look at data and apply it differently. I mean, what sort of things are you finding how are you looking at the data? How are you understanding the impact of that on the targeting of your content?
Actually, before the IDFA case, it was easy to find the players and retarget them. It's like a game changer for the industry. That is the normal, actually. And it's starting to getting important for the using the data and analyzing the data. And it's like the evolving of the industry that we find something that, then we're changing it and they find another way. Actually, like the improvement of the technology. And we have to adapt the technology. We have to adapt to analyzing the data part. Okay, maybe it's good for the privacy for the user side. And actually, we was discussing about that before starting. Is it good or not? For my side, it's not good because I want to get recommendation about my interested area. They just recommend me the game that related to me, maybe the product and the discounted version of the product. It's good for me, but okay, it's good for the privacy too. There's no any best or worst scenario for this case. The most important thing that adapting the changing things as soon as possible. Yeah.
No, exactly. And I think it's really difficult to sort of call it bad or call it good. We need monitors here, I think, for you guys to hear. I have my headpiece on. Maybe we'll grab you some headphones later. So I will talk a little bit more profoundly then, shall I? I'll try and keep the mic away so I don't deafen everybody. So I think you're right. It's adapt and survive is something I think that we in the mobile advertising space in particular. For those who don't know, I was the original evangelist on Unity Ads. So I've been around doing this stuff for far too long, which is why they get me to sit on panels and talk to people. So adapting is essential DNA of anyone who's been involved in user acquisition, whether it's formats, whether it's targeting, whether it's strategies, how we monetize, all of these aspects. What has been the sort of been the most important adaptation, do you think, since this change? Is it about the way we collect data? Is it about the way we target? Adam, I'll start with you. What do you think is sort of like the biggest kind of deliberate change that you guys think you've made that's had the most impact?
So I guess I can talk on behalf of a lot of the clients that we work with, and I think for me I've always been an advocate of re-engagement and in any way, shape, or form, and the efforts towards re-engagement seem to have come on a hell of a long way. The really fine-tuning push notifications, emails, SMS, Facebook bots, whatever else you can possibly use to be able to bring users back into your game. The other area that's really sort of seems to have taken a jump forward because of this is cross-promotion. I mean, companies with multiple different apps are really starting to work out the best paths that they can use across the entire estate. And I love that. You know, I'm a product guy. I love that area of innovation.
Oh, it feels so weird for me to hear you say that's innovation, given that that's exactly what was the core of what we used to do before we did all this stuff. And I think maybe that is this a kind of a hint of some of the wider picture here, which is like there's a lot of stuff that direct response and performance-based marketing did to kill off traditional behaviors. But are we having to sort of go back to the old checklists and old booklet, skill lists?
Yeah, for sure. And it's sort of. It's almost coming back. Not to the same extent,
Never
but it's
the same.
almost coming back to the old sort of brand advertising and really sort of, magazine articles and that kind of thing. That way of movement. But yeah, I mean, it has taken everybody a step backwards. But I don't know. I can't help but feel it's for in a good way.
Yeah, Brett, do you think this is a more level playing field? Because I think there was an argument that a lot of particularly indie developers were walking away from mobile because it was too hard. Has this possibly created a new opportunity for those teams, or is it more complicated than that?
So, right. Once we've accepted the reality, what are you going to do about it? And I think the same challenge applies to the indie developer, to the product madnesses of the world, the large developer. Bango's position on this is somewhat unique in that we're trying to pioneer purchase behavior targeting as the method by which you can build audiences. So the way that we think about this is 20 years ago, we were all pushed ads based on things you searched for through Google. 10 years ago, you were pushed ads based upon things through your social network, things that you liked and your affinities. Now you can get ads pushed to you based on things that you've bought. And that seems a lot more relevant when at the end of the day, the experience inside of an app is to monetize through in-app purchase. So that's one sort of way out of this. It's not the only solution. But it's a new one that can kind of counterbalance the challenges, the restrictions that we've all been pushed under through this. So that's one sort of innovative way through this. And again, it applies to indie developers that have the same handicap that the large advertisers do as well.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Damia, what about for yourself? Do you feel that there's been specific things that have changed the way that people work, that has been for the better, or that has forced us to try new things?
Starting with this whole period, we say that the data is important. To analyze the data and starting the modeling on your predictive things and probabilistic things. The first things the studios have to do that, collecting the correct formatting of the events and the data, because the in-app data and user level data they became more important than the previous version. And they always miss the tracking, the collecting the event part, because they think that, okay, we have the tutorial complete, we have the level complete, that's enough. But after this period, it's not enough to, we started to collect more events in the more provenient way, actually. We designed the taxonomy for each different game type and the genre. And then we recommend them, hey guys, you should keep this event and keep your eyes on that event. You need to use this event for your predictive modeling and probabilistic things, actually. Then, yeah.
It is an interesting area because, just for some context, I did some work with the Information Commission Office in the UK. There's a new data, newish, it was September last year, called the Age-Appropriate Design Code, which you can be fined up to 20 million euros or 4% of your global turnover, whichever is larger. Yes, I said larger. And very few people know this exists. But if you're actually doing anything with data with any UK customer, you're liable to that set of regulations. And we had to provide some best practice. Some of the key things is about basically understanding what you're capturing, communicating what you're capturing. And there's some really kind of interesting kind of consequences to that, particularly like you're no longer allowed to assume that somebody is over 18 just because they made a credit card transaction. Think about what that means in terms of what we're doing. So if you're handling your users' data and you're using event-level information that could be attributed to them as an individual, you're in massive risk. Massive risk. Now, it's all manageable. Don't be too frightened. It's okay. But what I think is really important is how you handle that data. So, as somebody who works with data, do you have any kind of views on what the change in IDFA has done, and all these other regulations? And by the way, more regulation will be coming. You can guarantee that. With all this kind of constraint around data, with all this kind of view about protecting the user, which is good. As we've said, which is good. What behaviors do you think that developers should be paying attention to make sure they can have the good use of information without creating privacy risk?
The first thing is that, okay, you have data, you collect data. The most important thing is actually at the beginning, asking the right question about the data. If you don't ask the right question to the data, you cannot get the answer. And for that reason, we always recommend to studios that you combine your user acquisition team and the data team and the maybe product team together to ask questions together before design your data. Then if they find the right question to ask the data, they go and deep dive in the data and they collect the right part, they collect the right format and get the answer. Actually, this is my the idea that they come together. It's not separated from the other units of the game studios. Combine your all part of the people from the UA, product and data, and they will focus together on that topic, actually. Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing that's interesting about this is keeping your player account data entirely separate from the telemetry and using your telemetry to understand. So if you know that you've acquired a user from a source, there's no reason why you can't pass a completely anonymized ID that has a cohort that says they came from that source, they've been playing this for so many days. That lets me understand as an owner of a game what's going on. Therefore, I can see which sources are delivering me the most value, and therefore, if I'm acquiring users through UA, I can basically do my targeting. But it's still a lot less sensitive, I would argue, than others. So, Adam, from your point of view, I mean, when you're coming in as AppsFlyer and you're looking at what advice would you give to people about how they use data and how they kind of tap into player audiences, given these vast array of privacy regulations that are coming in?
I think there's a lot of being able to look at where your audience is coming from and try and tackle it in a broader sense. So instead of user-level targeting, starting to look at behavioral targeting and really trying to understand the personas of your audience and how to touch those personas. So where those users are coming from, their other likes and interests, to be able to try and pull them in. So ads become way less targeted, but you're still going after the right set of users. And obviously, sorry, just to add to that one, this is a two-parter. Creative is another way of being able to appeal. Using different creatives for different places is tailoring them to the likes and interests of your audience is a real strong way of being able to pull users in.
And is there an argument? I tend to feel like I'm less interested in what an individual does. I'm actually more interested in what the likely group of individuals are to do. Therefore, I can better target more people who will do the behaviors I want. So I think this cohort, this kind of persona level analysis is actually potentially more useful in some ways.
I would agree completely, yeah.
So Brett, from your point of view, do you agree with that on the creative side?
100%. I think that there's a tendency that we all sort of focus and advertise to one archetype that you think is relevant for your particular game, your particular app. And our research has shown that while true, there are adjacent and overlapping categories that are completely unrelated to your core game. I'll give you an example that players who play in, say, a bubble shooter game, a very, very specific niche of casual games, will also buy and play in dating apps. Totally unrelated categories, and yet those overlaps exist. And you have to kind of look into the data and find these trends. Sort of pivoting off of that, though, in addition to kind of finding those niches, the strategy that we really are seeing a lot of is diversification of your marketing budget. So to kind of take a few steps back, about 5 years ago, while I was at a different company, I saw that ad budgets were kind of really monopolized by Facebook. All ads, like 50% of budgets were on Facebook, and the other 25% on Google, and the other 25% scattered amongst ad networks and things like that. This shift is really changed. Today, it's like 30% on Facebook. It's really, really changed. And now we're seeing proliferation of all kinds of other networks, specifically TikTok, but also DSPs like Liftoff and things like that. And that actually, I think, is healthy. It's a nice trend. I mean, from Facebook's point of view, it's probably not, but overall, it's probably a good trend to diversify and not put so much weight onto a single network. And that, I think, is kind of the way that you have to adapt.
Yeah, kind of a more portfolio kind of way of looking at the
100% portfolio.
Yeah.
It's a good way of saying it. Yeah.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one thing I find interesting is because we're in the PC and mobile space, we're finding that there's real opportunities in looking at some of the techniques that PC games have used for years. So thinking about the kind of social messaging, how that integrates with your UA, how your in-game activity integrates with that as well. So creating a narrative for your game that is driven by the game's activity, that's experienced in the social media and in the in-game messaging and delivered through the UA is an incredibly powerful way to think about how you build your game in mobile. But we're finding that PC doesn't have that performance technique in general. I mean, okay, I'm speaking generally. And being able to apply that performance technique with the existing social messaging and so on and so forth, again, is starting to become really interesting. I think we're going to see I mean, we don't have the same level of like access in terms of rewarded ads in PC. I suspect that will come at some point. There's a lot of resistance to that amongst the audience as well. So, you know, we've got to bear that in mind. But what I think is really fascinating is the fact that we're starting to, in fact, I'm going to go back to the 80s and 90s when I was learning marketing in my diploma in marketing. Yes, I am a Chartered Institute of Marketing member in the UK. I don't pay. Anyway, the point being is that you learned to think about synergy. You learned to think about integration. You learned to think about the balance between performance and brand. And I think the thing that we have struggled, I think, in general, historically in mobile, is that we haven't built strong brands at the heart of our process. There are a handful of strong brands, but you know, we think about Clash of Clans, we think about Clash Royale, we think about Angry Birds, we think about Candy Crush. Beyond that, the actual game is not essentially as much an interest as a brand, I would argue.
But that's because, right, that these apps are short-lived, right?
Yeah.
The fact that there's, I mean, think like 2 million apps in the App Store, and you could probably name on one hand the ones that people remember, and I think you just did. So building a brand for an app probably is prohibitively expensive and time-consuming. You can't really do it. And the ones that have broken through, I don't know, maybe they're the lucky few. There's some sort of transactional nature about an app that it doesn't last terribly long, unfortunately. And I think from our talking to large platforms like Facebook, that's a sort of the new trend, that apps tend to live longer. I mean, have you seen this? Is that sort of the pattern that you're seeing as well?
I just said...
Yeah, sorry.
Good, cool. I'd have said there's two different types of app. So you've got the games that have the longevity. You know, take Raid Shadow Legends, for instance, one that's close to my heart. You know, I've personally been playing that for about 3 years. So there is the apps that have that kind of long-term attraction, and then there's the sort of smaller casual apps. And so, you know, games like Call of Duty, that kind of thing, people will play that ongoing for a long, long time. So I
also predated mobile.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. But I would have said yes. There is there are those two camps. There is one that is very short-lived.
But it's interesting you mentioned RAID because of the proliferation of ads that were off the mobile network for that particular title. So, Damia, from your point of view, I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, do you think that we're seeing innovation in the way that we're promoting, the changes of behavior, in the way that we're finding users? I mean, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, as far as I've seen that the mostly the creative part is important. If you are reflecting your game real part and your art is good and you get the valuable players for your game, and then if you are faking it, it's not work as far as you know
What do
that.
you mean? Those fake ads are fantastic. We all love them, don't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they try some time to time, yeah, but it doesn't work. And if you have the good creatives and the art design, it's good for your game. And of course, that the iOS part and in the next feature, Google will handle the targeting things for our side because they released that the conversion value and they changed the new conversion definitions for us. Actually, they try to handle the all user acquisition and finding user side for the mobile game studios. You just need to feed the iOS and Google part with the right data. If you feed them in a good conversion value and that conversion value reflecting your game, and iOS and the Google Play will handle for your side actually. Yeah, this is their solution.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, just to tell, we're going to wrap up in a second, but I mean, one thing I just want to chuck in is some of the frustrations that I've seen since. I think a lot of ad networks are trying every technique they can to sort of get that conversion. So much so that I think they're starting to damage the player experience, in particular where you have an ad that appears and they shift where the closing button is, or they delay the ability of the closing button. So much so I think that's actually starting to break retention. And it's, you know, personally, when I see a playable ad, I delete the app. I just cannot be asked. It's, yeah. So, I mean, do you guys, I mean, I don't want to kind of call anyone out on it because, I mean, obviously, you know, there are lots of reasons why people do this, and I'm not trying to blame any individual company or team. Do you think we've got a risk at the moment where some of the ad companies are trying techniques which are short-term KPIs rather than long-term KPIs? Adam, what do you think?
I mean, I think this has been going on for a long time. This isn't just happened like
True.
yesterday, and people are always going to try and play systems. Like, you know, this is this is as long as time, you know. But yeah, it's true what you're saying. I do think there is a distinct possibility that the trust can be damaged now more than ever with the types of things that are being tried, and yeah, it is a concern.
Anyone want to add to that? I mean, any tips or tricks that we can try to mitigate against that would be interesting.
I mean,
I don't have an answer, by the way.
yeah, I mean, if anyone has it, then you know it's pretty impressive. It's kind of like stock investing. You have to kind of diversify your portfolio. I think you have to diversify your marketing mix. That's, like you said, it's a portfolio strategy. It's always been the case. Unfortunately, probably more necessary now than before.
There was an argument back in the Unity ad days. We were looking at the benefit of staying with one network to be able to learn in terms of, you know, user behavior and what user interests
Right,
were.
then you can consolidate your budget. You get more learnings back.
But without the ability to store that data in a kind of useful way nowadays, that's a bit more complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like putting all your money on black. You know, it's probably not the best strategy anymore.
So let's wrap up. So, Damia, can you let us know what you think is the one piece of advice that you would give to the audience in terms of, like, you know, managing data and being effective in this modern era of user acquisition?
First of all, the keep and collect the right format of the data on your system. Don't miss that point. If you miss that point, you left money on the table. Yeah, you should keep the right data format in your system, and not just for the last 60 days. The focus on the keeping as long as possible. And for other side, actually, for the UA part, maybe okay, you can do the predictive modeling and the feedback, the conversion value. You can optimize your CPIs and marketing budgets, of course. And another case that for some specific case, and today's mobile marketing is like a red ocean that is not everyone is lucky. And then if you are building some game like the community-based board games or the social games, and the most important thing that detect the networking of your people. That if you detect someone that doing the high retention and in-app purchase and then the buying something that the all buying before behavior is connected to each other. Let's say that we are the friends. If I'm spending money in the game and I push you to spend more money and push you to buy something, and if you detect some node in your game, the node player, if you detect their players and you convince them to invite their player to your game, it is the best user acquisition for your site, but just for some specific game cases, not for all genres. And the drop up actually, they keep your data on your system and try to analyze it as far as you can actually. Yeah.
Makes sense. Adam, do you have any kind of one thing that you would share with the audience?
Get into modeling, not the catwalk type, the predictive.
Oh, I don't know. You're not a bad-looking guy.
I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. The predictive analytics, like it's looking at 7-day LTV, that kind of thing, ROAS, projected ROAS. I think that's a winning point right now.
Absolutely. Right.
I think that using services like yours make a lot of sense, right? That any little edge you can possibly find, predictive analytics that actually will tell you something that you may not see yourself because you're not going to invest in a whole infrastructure to do it. I think that makes a lot of sense just to get that little bit of an edge and insight that you won't normally have.
Perfect. So I think hopefully what we've given you is an indication that life is not over post IDFA, that there are some real complications, there are some issues. I don't think there's a clear winner personally about this. Even I think the player themselves isn't necessarily a clear winner. But we are seeing steps towards sensible approaches to privacy, which I think is important for us and for our players and for the trust that we have with those players. And I think hopefully we've also given you some indications, some thoughts about how to adapt to that with smart portfolio planning, with use of kind of great creative, and really thinking about kind of the personas of your players as groups rather than as individuals. So hopefully that's useful information. I'd like to thank my panelists for taking part with this. Thank you very much, guys. That was fantastic. Really appreciate your time.